Welcome back to Movie Recap. Today I'm gonna show you a 2016 biographical war film called The King's Choice. Spoilers ahead. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The movie begins on April 8th at Skogum, Asker, wherein King Haakon VII happily plays hide and seek with his grandchildren in the middle of snowfall. While he counts from 1 to 10, his grandchildren quickly find some hiding spots. Crown Prince Olaf suddenly appears at the front door. Due to that, King Haakon sluggishly walks to approach his son, only to find out that the transport ship was torpedoed in Lillesand earlier that day. Shocked, King Haakon also learns that the ship was carrying a dozen German soldiers, but luckily, they were all rescued. Afterward, Olav gives his father, Haakon, a letter. Then he closely expresses concern that the government of Prime Minister Johan Nygaardsvold refuses to give up Norway's neutrality in the face of German aggression. It shows that Prime Minister Johan does not want to go against King Haakon's foreign minister, and does not want to negotiate with anyone. Due to that, it will all depend on Koht. Technically, Olav wants his father to show the people how far they can go. Yet, King Haakon chooses not to interfere with the decision of Prime Minister Johan, but instead watches the situation without doing anything. While Olav's waiting for King Haakon's response, his wife, Martha, suddenly intervenes and informs Olav that Nico's calling him on the phone. As Olav goes back inside their house, Martha talks with King Haakon, reminding him to go to the doctor to check up on his back. Afterward, she suddenly opens up about the occurring events, and says that they can't be on the wrong side in the war. Once again, King Haakon chooses not to respond to the said issue. Later at night, at the German embassy in Oslo, German envoy Kurt Brauer receives news from Norsk Telegram Bureau. So, he immediately calls his wife to join him in listening to the radio. After carefully dropping his son in the bassinet, Brauer joins his wife in the living room. While listening, Anneliese informs Brauer that France and England have mined the coast to prevent the shipping of ores. Due to that, Brauer shows disbelief as he continues listening for more information about the German warships readily invading some parts of Norway. Meanwhile, at Fort Oscarsborg near Drubak, a soldier named Kopas informs Colonel Birger Eriksson that foreign ships are arriving by Furter as Raoy and Bolern are reported fighting. Due to that, the colonel commands Kopas to turn off the lights at the fort, and ask the superintendent to evacuate from Halangsballen to Hvidsten. However, Kopas reminds him that they only have contingent for Cannon 1. So, Colonel Eriksson says to spread both cannon and call non-combatants. German ships are nearly coming, and Colonel Eriksson immediately prepares his understaffed and inexperienced garrison for combat despite not receiving orders to shoot. Early on April 9th, Eriksson uses a binocular and discovers that he spots the German cruiser Blücher entering Drubak Sound. Going back to the German embassy in Oslo, Brauer has left no choice but to sign a memorandum of voluntary cooperation in the war despite not wanting to get involved. Technically, military attaché Lieutenant Colonel Hartvig Pohlmann instructs Brauer to convince the Norwegian government to allow the German troops into the country. Brauer is mandated to encourage them that the Germans' intention is not aggression. Unfortunately, despite disagreeing with the sudden news from Pohlmann and defending Norway from a British invasion, he has no choice but to follow the order after finding out that Norway is the Germans' main target because of the shoreline. It becomes a struggle for Brauer because he knows that Norway sacrificed a lot to maintain neutrality. Meanwhile, Colonel Eriksson eventually considers the incoming German ship to be hostile. So, despite not receiving any instructions from Oslo to engage, Colonel Eriksson already gives the order to load the cannon. Once the cannon is ready, Colonel Eriksson receives another piece of news, saying that Filtvet reported a German ship with lights off. Due to that, he commands his soldier to start speeding up the lighthouse towards Drubak, Sodom. Meanwhile, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Oslo, Brauer takes the German offer, and immediately drives on the way to Foreign Minister Halvdan Koht's office. Upon entering, Brauer instantly delivers the message, wherein he addresses the request to the Norwegian government on behalf of the German leader, Adolf Hitler. After giving the envelope, Brauer states to Koht that the German come to defend Norway from the British invasion. Then in return, the Norwegian military will provide no resistance. Due to that, Koht says that he needs to discuss the offer first with the government, who is staying in the cabinet next door. So, Brauer remains silent and waits for the decision. On the other hand, Colonel Eriksson receives a message that Captain Anderson wants a categorical order about whether to fire torpedoes against the invading ship. Pissed off, Colonel Eriksson refuses to follow Captain Anderson's order and commands his soldiers to get ready. Minutes later, Colonel Eriksson already finds out that the invading ship passed for Smaskar. However, the soldier keeps reminding him to wait for confirmation from Kopas, but Colonel Eriksson can't wait anymore. So, he immediately commands the troops to engage cannons 1 and 2 to fire. Afterward, he tells Sodom to use the fortress guns and torpedo battery. Due to that, Colonel Eriksson watches the Blucher sink after multiple shoots. Meanwhile, Brouwer receives terrible news from Koht after consulting the cabinet. Koht says that Norway is a sovereign nation, and it would cease to be accepted the German demands. Afterward, he gives back the envelope as a result of saying no to Brouwer's offer. On the other hand, King Haakon suddenly wakes up due to his assistant's message that the Prime Minister wants to talk to him on the telephone. So, King Haakon immediately takes the call, only to find out that there's an impending invasion due to repelled attack and that he needs to flee Oslo. As King Haakon listens, he learns that the president leaves him an extra train for escape. Later, the royal family immediately boards a train for Hamar. Once inside, King Haakon receives a message from Peter that German ships were seen in all major ports and across the country. So, Crown Prince Olav intervenes and asks if there's any diplomatic contact and a possible trade. Seeing how worried her husband Olav is, Martha talks and assures Olav to put his trust in Koht and the government to solve the problems. Afterward, Peter informs the royal family that the government wants a second meeting when they get to Hamar. Meanwhile, Brouwer orders Anneliese to contact Koht as he and the Norwegian parliament convenes to discuss negotiations with Germany. But then, Anneliese informs him immediately that Koht cannot be reached. Upon their arrival in Hamar, King Haakon and Olav eventually meet Prime Minister Johan Nygaardsvold and Hambro. Afterward, King Haakon learns that the Germans finally invaded Oslo, so the government immediately sends orders for mobilization. However, Olav intervenes once again, emphasizing the words to his father that their belief in neutrality remains clear. So, Hambro reassures Olav that new negotiations will come. While walking, King Haakon finds out that his elder brother, King Christian, was delivered to Denmark at 5 a.m. Meanwhile, Brouwer talks to Pullman, his intermediary with the Norwegian cabinet, wherein he discovers that they take all the entrances and exits of highways in Oslo. Technically, it shows its revenge for bombing the Blucher despite wanting to protect the Norwegians. So, Brouwer tries to calm him down, saying that the Germans should let him negotiate and contact the government before further losses. Due to that, Pullman reminds Brouwer that once General Falkenhorst arrives tomorrow, Norway will be in their hands, starting from the king to the smallest farmer. So, if today's deal fails in the hands of Brouwer, Pullman will have no choice but to put the action. Worried, Brouwer starts finding the government as he doesn't want the German troops to find it for him. Later, King Haakon talks with Prime Minister Hambro, only to find out that the government has no determination to decide. So, Prime Minister Hambro made a final verdict himself, which he chose to refuse to sign the waiver to negotiate between small groups. Inside the Norwegian Parliament court, Prime Minister Koht announces that a German envoy asked to resume negotiations based on documents sent to them earlier. Then they said no for an answer. But since most of the people in the Norwegian parliament wanted a change, Prime Minister Koht decided to resume the negotiations immediately. Suddenly, Olav intervenes and asks the Norwegian parliament officials what has changed in the last few hours. So, Prime Minister Koht answers, telling him that Norway is under attack, and the government itself has lost control of a large part of the country. Due to that, they continue the negotiations in the hope of a ceasefire. After that, King Haakon eventually rises from his seat to leave, telling them that he will be happy to support it if the government wants to negotiate. Upon leaving, Olav contradicts his father's decision again. So, King Haakon clarifies that he should try to learn something instead of criticizing the whole time. King Haakon is concerned about putting his family together and supporting the government, but Olav acts otherwise. Due to that, Olav argues with his father and tells him that he should command the government to start mobilizing instead of being afraid to fight. Meanwhile, Brouwer discovers that Pullman receives orders from Berlin to send paratroopers to Hamar to capture the king and the cabinet. As Brouwer waits for Pullman's response, Anneliese suddenly intervenes and calls Brouwer, saying that Police Chief Christian Welhaven wants to talk to him inside the office. Once inside, Welhaven informs Brouwer that the Norwegian government reported intending to continue negotiations. Then he adds that all hostilities should cease immediately. Due to that, Brouwer tells Pullman, who's waiting outside the office, to stop the action against Hamar. However, Pullman says that he couldn't stop the soldiers anymore as they had already left. Meanwhile, at the farm cell at Hamar, the royal family are peacefully having their breakfast when suddenly they hear that Vidkun Quisling proclaims himself Prime Minister of the Norwegian government over the national radio. Due to that, Olav raises the radio volume, only to find out Quisling is now calling upon the Norwegian people to accept the German occupation forces, a deal they have to face after England broke Norway's neutrality. Meanwhile, Anneliese tries to convince Brouwer to talk to Quisling, but Brouwer says he can no longer take a stand because Quisling has already given a coup d'état. As German troops advance towards Hamar and Norway is now at war, the royal family and the cabinet have left no choice but to choose another option to relocate to Elverum. Eventually, Brouwer receives a telephone call from the Prime Minister. Upon taking it, Brouwer explains that Quisling will never be accepted as a government leader. Due to that, the Prime Minister puts the call on Adolf Hitler. Shocked, Brouwer has left no choice but to follow Hitler's order to go directly to the king and convince him to recognize Quisling's government. So, despite knowing that neither King Haakon nor the cabinet will agree with it, Brouwer begins to act on Hitler's behalf. Upon their arrival at Elverum, the royal family eventually makes a tough decision on how they will survive the war against the Germans. Despite not wanting the verdict, Martha accepts that King Haakon and his husband, Crown Prince Olav, will remain in the country while she and their 3 children will move to Sweden. Minutes after arriving at Elverum, Martha and the kids immediately leave the place because the Germans are already on their way. Meanwhile, King Haakon and Olav drive to Nybergsund to spend their night in the meantime. Nybergsund is a closer place to the border with Sweden. After midnight on April 10th, the German paratroopers eventually attack a roadblock at Midskagen. So, the Norwegian volunteers took immediate action, and then beat back the enemies. Unfortunately, one of the young Norwegian volunteers, Zeberg, severely injures himself from the explosive bomb while engaging in gunfire. At Nybergsund, the cabinet meets to discuss Brouwer's request to meet the king alone to end the hostilities, wherein Olav disagrees with sending his father to them. However, the cabinet has no choice as trading is the only option to have peace in Norway. So, if King Haakon refuses to take Hitler's offer, the carnage will only worsen. So, despite Olav's objections and fears for his father's security, Haakon agrees to meet with Brouwer at Elverum. Due to that, Olav has left no choice but to agree with his father. Later, Brouwer drives to Elverum alone, while King Haakon, on the other hand, leaves Nybergsund early. A while later, Brouwer and King Haakon finally arrive at Elverum Public School. Once inside, King Haakon begins the meeting with Brouwer while the cabinet listens to be the witnesses. But Brouwer insists that it's an order from Hitler to have the conversation only between them. Leaving him no choice, King Haakon orders the cabinet to leave the room for a while. Once alone, Brouwer urges Haakon to follow the example of his elder brother, King Christian of Denmark, to capitulate without further resistance. He then shows that the official government has no power, especially since Quisling has it already. Afterward, Brouwer immediately tells King Haakon to sign the paper. Frustrated, King Haakon explains that he cannot just give an immediate answer to Brouwer's offer because the whole people must make the decision. Unfortunately, Brouwer only infuriates King Haakon more, resulting in Haakon relaying his discussion to the cabinet, for he cannot accept Quisling as Norway's prime minister. Afterward, the cabinet enters the room once again. So, instead of King Haakon, the cabinet replaces him, and talks with Brouwer for negotiation. Due to that, Brouwer has left no choice but to go and wait for King Haakon's response until the evening. After, King Haakon goes back to Nybergsund and talks with his son, Olav. Afterward, he calls for a meeting with the official, wherein he reveals that the German negotiation is a heavy responsibility that he cannot support anymore. So, he gives the decision to the cabinet, for he will remain to his response of not accepting the German demands. Technically, King Haakon would only offer to surrender if the cabinet felt otherwise. Inspired by King Haakon's decision, the cabinet informs Brouwer of their refusal. After receiving the king's response through the telephone call, Brouwer immediately notifies Pohlmann about it, only to find out that Hitler had already received the message. The following day, German aircraft begins to bomb Elverum and Nybergsund to respond to the cabinet's decision. Due to that, Haakon and the cabinet forced to flee into the woods. While running, King Haakon suddenly gets separated from his son, Olav, due to continuous explosions. The movie ends with King Haakon, the Crown Prince Olav, and the cabinet eventually escaping to Britain after a sudden attack in Nybergsund. It is revealed that they stayed in Britain until the war ended. Unfortunately, a record shows that 34 people lost their lives during the bombings in Elverum. But on the other hand, all citizens from Nybergsund survived. Then, years later, the German finally surrendered, and King Haakon eventually got reunited with his grandson, Prince Harald, in London. Due to that, King Haakon, Crown Prince Olav, and Prince Harald safely returned to Norway to reunite with Martha and the other kids. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this to help the channel out. Have a nice day.